knock over some stuff while we're talking.
Oh yeah, like make a punch a hole wall or something, yeah? Let's get a barroom brawl up in here.
Oh, I'm down. Mosh pit, we'll get some of this.
Oh, that's amazing.
I've already broken one.
So what mediums are you using over here?
IG Live.
Cool.
And then just recorded video and gonna put that on YouTube.
Awesome.
Oh man, you got way nicer shoes there.
That's true.
The clouds in the dirt, the storm clouds.
Okay, so you just everybody let me know when you're ready to rock.
I think we're ready to rock.
You're recording on both? We good?
Recording on both. Still waiting for some followers on here.
Alright, man.
But yeah.
Count for good luck.
I
Boom.
don't know. I like it.
Okay, here we go. Welcome back. Always the Journey podcast, episode number 9. I'm your host, Jason Woodland. We're actually doing something a little bit different this time around. We're actually doing this live down at the Clever Bean. Can you throw out your address really quick?
Yeah, sure. It's 656 East 114 South over Suite J in Draper, Utah.
All right. So this is a new coffee shop. They've been around now for just over 100 days. So I want you to come out here and check these guys out. Creighton and Dennis are the proprietors here. I actually met Dennis almost a year ago now, and we were at a Best Pocket Business Coalition event, and found out that he was about to open a coffee shop with Creighton, and I used to be in the tea business myself. And anyway, we started talking business, and we've become great friends, all three of us, and very excited to be down here. Live in studio coffee shop. Yeah. So anyway, this is actually going to be also a little bit of a different episode. Creighton asked me a couple of weeks back if he could interview me, and I thought, yeah, of course, that sounds like fun. And so we decided to turn it into episode number 9 for Always the Journey. So it's been a great last month and a half since episode number 8. Business is going extremely well. Love seeing other businesses blowing up and having a good time. So anyway, I'm going to turn the time over to Creighton, and he's going to just have full reign of the rest of the podcast. This is not going to be post-produced, so anything that happens is going to be part of it. Again, we're in a live coffee shop right now, so there's going to be people coming in and out. I said if a bullet bike comes cruising through your front door, we're going to continue on, just as long as everybody's still safe, of course. But anyway, Creighton, my man, good to see you, and I'm so extremely excited to be down here with you. And this podcast is yours, my man, so rock and roll.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the opportunity. It really means a lot. In fact, just to give a little bit of the background of our relationship with Jason, and this coffee shop is, ever since we were introduced to Jason, I honestly have thought he is one of the single most authentic individuals I've ever met in my entire life. He's been unbelievably helpful in the creation of all of this, just from the knowledge he had from owning his own tea shop, Tiramisu. He got us connected with our tea partner who we use today, Tizanti and Scott Little, and he's just honestly been such a phenomenal force in helping us move forward. The relationship that we've developed, I cannot thank him enough for it. Would have to say that on this, you're probably one of the most genuine people I've ever met in my entire life. I feel that every time you have a relationship, every time you build a relationship, you do it in such a genuine way that you are engaged, you're listening, you really care about the individual, and your love for humanity, to me, is greater than almost any person I've ever met or seen or ever had the idea. So really appreciate it.
I'm humbled. Thank you very much. I appreciate
you shouldn't
that.
be. You earned that introduction more than anything. It is honestly my absolute honor to be interviewing you today, and really excited for the opportunity. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming down to the shop, making it to where we could work out. As you know, Dennis and I are working all the hours, so it's hard to get away from the shop sometimes. So it really means a lot that you came down and made this presence here.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So I guess we'll jump right into it. Be perfectly honest, just to get a little background, I was wondering if you could tell us some of your background growing up and some of your story to start with.
Yeah, that's definitely a loaded question.
Exactly.
And also wanted to give a shout out to Sawyer really quick. What's up, my man? Thanks for coming down. And also, what's up to everybody on IG Live? Thanks for joining us, and also on soon to be YouTube. So, I had a very, very eclectic childhood, to say the least. My so my parents divorced when I was 6. I had both, wonderful parents. They were wild characters in and of themselves. My mom was, for all intents and purposes, somewhat of a child star. She was born here in Utah, but grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. And she was a singer, and she had her own record. She was also became. I'm just messing with my mic over here. That's the thing that's so fun about being live. You can just mess around, and the thing is, people are watching or going to watch, so it's like you can't hide behind the podcast anymore. And I love that. So anyway, she was the spokeswoman for Fort Worth National Bank, and like I said, she had her own record. It was a 45, and she actually got out. She was on billboards. She was all over the radio, and like I said, she was somewhat of a child star, which can be good and bad. I think she went into a bit of a rebelliousness later on. She actually became sort of a traditional, like, Haight-Ashbury hippie. Like, she went out to San Francisco and did all that. Very open-minded person, very rebellious in her own right, and that's definitely where I get much of my rebelliousness. She did, later on in life, she suffered from alcohol, and that led to me growing up very quickly. Like I said, parents divorced at an early age, and there was periods of time where it was just my mom and my sister and I, and so it also sort of pushed me into a lot of sort of underground movements, which is where I learned an astronomical amount of my lessons in life. I got involved in punk rock, I got involved in the graffiti scene, and the thing is too, at that point in time, being at this sort of in-home family structure didn't exist, I searched for family. So I helped raise my little sister. Like I said, I grew up in a lot of these underground scenes that became my family. And to this day, I still have ultra-tight relationships with people I knew all the way back in 4th grade. Icky Tonga being one of them. I've known him since the 4th grade, and we're still in touch on a monthly basis. My friend Hoa, which is, he lives out in Queens, New York. And it is cool to have those types of relationships, because we bonded in a situation that to a lot of people may have been sort of a wild ride. So that'll give you just sort of a slight snippet.
Oh yeah. No, that's fascinating. And you had mentioned, I'll reference your podcast a couple of times because I absolutely love the content.
Thanks.
Great job in a lot of the episodes. And you had mentioned before moving around 15, 16 times, and it seems like you were able, as opposed to kind of isolate yourself with that, you were able to really find out how to build deep relationships, because sometimes you had very minimal amounts of time with people. And I remember there's a couple of stories that you talk about just spending a couple of months with someone who is still a lifelong friend. And it's fascinating to me, because I have friends from high school that I went 4 years of high school with, and I don't even know where they're at right now. I don't know what they're doing, and yet you're able to take these small snippets and create these very deep relationships and then maintain them over a lifetime. And I think that's part of kind of your superpower. We talk about superpowers a lot here, as far as things that we can do better or best, and I think that's one of yours. It's just that creating, cultivating, and really keeping relationships alive. So really appreciate that, and it's fantastic to watch from the outside.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's always been important, you always hear people and they say, oh, we should grab lunch sometime. We need to meet up, but then years go by, and I've always tried to take into it where I say, if someone says, oh, we got to grab lunch sometime, I'm like, okay, let's pull up our calendars. And they're like, holy moly, you're like serious. I'm like, oh, I'm dead serious. I mean, even I was talking to Sawyer today, wild afternoon, so my man, I wasn't able to get back, but we're going to grab lunch next, or dinner next week. That's the thing, is that to me, it's extremely important to make sure that you figure out that schedule that houses your people. And people are my people. Like, I love humans. I love humanity. I love the heart of humanity. And I believe that humans, for the most part, are good and want to produce good and want to do good. sometimes people just don't know how, and that's a whole different philosophical conversation.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I would love to get into that, and we'll touch on that a little bit as we go through some of these questions, because I think that's a phenomenal stance, and I think that stance of optimism, because I consider you just an eternal optimist. I really think that you look at the bright side of humanity and where we're moving forward, and where there's a lot of people that see the change coming in the future, and they're scared of it, you see nothing but opportunity.
Yeah.
And that takes such an optimistic outlook on life. Another part that I'm really impressed with as far as what you cultivate throughout your life, and something I really respect you for. So definitely would love to get into that here in a little bit as well.
Cool.
Looking at your college career, looks like you got a bachelor's in business management, you got a bachelor's in marketing, and then you got a certificate in international marketing, I believe.
Yes.
And that, I think if I remember the story right, was one of the keys that then you went to Hong Kong with to try and kind of build a business or expand that. Why don't you expand on that part of the story a little bit for us?
Yeah, so back when I was in high school, I had somewhat of a mentor. Well, I definitely consider him a mentor now. Then I didn't know what a mentor really was, right? And his name was Roger Nolf, and I give him a lot of credit. He was one of the biggest characters I've ever known in my life, even still to this day. But I give him a lot of credit because he was extremely sharp on so many different things to do with business. The only catch was he was a very wild government conspiracy theory guy. So any kind of conspiracy theory that came down the pipe, he was on it. But he took a liking to me because I loved reading and I loved learning. And so he taught me a ton about sort of delving in and learning as much as I could. But then he also had me sort of paranoid, where I got to a point where I'm like, I'm not going to go to college, because within the next couple of years, everything's going to fall apart and the economy's going to fail and everything's going to be gone. And so I was talking to my mom, and she was also, she knew how to ground me really quick. And in high school, and I said, well, it doesn't matter anyway. And she said, well, what if the end of the world isn't now? And that was literally all it took. And like, because I'm in my high school years, and so I'm like, yeah, I guess what if it's not now? Okay, so I started then planning on the college concept, and then of course I got to that point where I'm like, well, it's maybe too late. I'm not going to go. And I sat down with my grandma, who is also one of my mentors growing up, and she said, I said, well, I'm going to be 27 years old by the time I graduate. And she goes, well, how old are you going to be at that time if you don't go to college? I'm like, well, I'll still be 27. She goes, okay, then what's your point? I'm like, okay, I'll go back to school. So finished up with a bachelor's in marketing. Well, I went back for business management, and then thought, well, heck, let's add a second one, because I love marketing, so I added a second one. And then I asked this school if I could take core classes out of the finance degree, and they said, well, you don't need to. And I said, well, I know I don't need to, I want to. And so I started taking core classes out of that. And then we sat down and they said, well, if you take 3 more core classes out of the finance, you're going to have a third bachelor's degree. And I thought, well, that's a little redundant. So I didn't do the third bachelor's degree, but the certificate came from back in 1999. This is actually before I went back to college. Was invited to go to Hong Kong to launch a nutraceutical company. And I was 22 years old at the time. And of course, when you're 22, you think you've got it all figured out. Like I thought, we're good to go. Like Jason Woodland takes Hong Kong. Like I literally thought that. I'm like, I'm going to go to Hong Kong. I'm going to, take it over in terms of business. It's going to be amazing. Very quickly realized that was not going to be the case. Was originally planning on going out there for 1 week. Very quickly also was told, don't even waste your time coming out here for 1 week. So I dedicated 2 weeks, and of course at the age of 22, I had a plumbing job at the time. I thought, you know what, 2 weeks is going to be good. I'm going to be able to crush Hong Kong in 2 weeks. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing what a 22-year-old mind thinks, and my level of confidence has always been pretty high, and I'm thankful for that. But that was a humbling experience. After 5 days, I realized 2 weeks was a pipe dream. So I elongated it to 1 month, and then after 2 weeks, realized a month was a pipe dream. So I pushed it to 2 months, and then 3 months, and it was right about 4 months. Was creating relationships and doing business. And there's a myriad of stories there that we could go down the rabbit hole on that were wildlife lessons. I had my 23rd birthday on the beach of the South China Sea with a couple of locals that I'd made friends with and became business partners with. So anyway, wild story.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, I'm sorry to add on that. I realize that you can't. Doing business in the Far East is a night and day difference than doing business here in America. And so that's when I enrolled in City University of Hong Kong to get an international marketing certificate, so I could just learn everything I could on what to do the right way. So that's where that came from.
Oh, that's fascinating. It seems that there's, at any point in your life where there's a question, it always comes back to, I need to learn more.
Yes.
And I really appreciate the way of doing that. I know that I really, I was kind of put into a learning mindset when I was going to middle school, high school by my parents, and they were not super strict, but definitely disciplined, and I was kind of forced to go that direction. And then when I went to college, being given that freedom, I kind of strayed away from it. After I turned about 2021, I started redeveloping that mindset and redeveloping that learning aspect of things. Have you always been just kind of an eternal learner, or is that something that was developed later in life? When did you see that trait come out?
So my mother, she was definitely into reading books and having me read books, but it amplified dramatically when I was in 5th grade.
Gotcha.
And the reason why that happened is, my mother suffering from a pretty severe alcohol usage. I finally got to a point where I was getting in a lot of trouble. I'd spent some time in youth services, and I finally had to tell my grandparents that my mom was drinking and that there were some problems in the household. So at that time, we took my mother to Dayspring, which was an in-house AA program at the time. This was when I was in 5th grade. We were sent to then live with my grandparents, my sister and I, opposite ends of the valley. My grandfather, who also was definitely a very strong mentor of mine, very, very strict in his own right. He was a strictly business kind of guy. Dean Hadfield is his name. He was a former vice president for Conoco Oil out of Texas. He also had breakfast with John F. Kennedy the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated, which is an ultra fascinating story in and of itself. But anyway, when we were sent to live with him, I came from virtually no structure. I mean, there was some structure, but not a ton, to extreme structure with my grandparents, which was good kind of structure, but it was the type of structure where it was, when you get out of school, you come home, you read the dictionary, you learn a set amount of words out of the dictionary, then you do your homework, then you can go and play. Which meant playtime decreased dramatically because, well, there's not a lot of time to then study the dictionary, study books, and then go and do your homework. So anyway, I got my love really for reading from both my grandparents. They read voraciously, and from there, I always got to learn really quick that if you come upon a problem, you've got to flip the script on that real quick, because there's always a solution to a problem. And one of the things my grandfather always used to tell me was, make sure you pick up as many keys as you possibly can. And I said, well, what do you mean by keys? He said, well, keys can be anything and everything. It can be a book, it could be a person you meet, it could be a class you take, a seminar you take, a degree you get. All of those are keys. And he said, if you come upon a door one day, and that door is locked, and you can look back in your life and you choicefully did not pick up that key, you'll only have yourself to blame. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to be in that situation, so I need to pick up every key I possibly can. So,
wow, that's fantastic. I love putting it in that perspective, because I've always looked at things, it's kind of like everything's a tool in this world in some sense. Like, it can be used, it can be used for good as far as betterment, things like that. I love the key analogy. I think that's a really profound way to put it. And then also putting the blame on yourself, on the entire idea of ownership of, if I didn't set myself up for success here, it's not anyone else's fault. I had the opportunity in the past. That's extremely strong. Your grandfather is actually a fascinating individual to me. one of the reasons I'm wearing a watch today is no joke because of your grandfather.
Oh, cool.
After we had first started the relationship, you had written in your blog about your grandfather always giving you watches. And Dennis has always been into watches and let me borrow his watch for the first 6 months to a year that we were working together. I didn't really like it that much. I didn't like wearing it. I didn't think it was useful. You have a clock on your phone. But it really changed when it became this awareness of time as opposed to this piece of jewelry.
Yeah.
And that was something that I thought was really powerful. So kind of give me a little bit of that background story as your grandfather giving you watches on different holidays and things like that, and just what that meant to you.
Yeah, so he was definitely very, very hardcore with time. I'm pretty hardcore with time, and he makes me look like an elementary school student regarding time. He always told me, time wasn't just about money per se. It was about capturing life, and if life is being squandered, obviously we know where that can go. And so he literally was giving me a watch for everything, every holiday under the sun. I was getting a watch for my birthday. I was getting a watch for Christmas and Easter and probably Flag Day. I mean, it was just, I was always getting watches. And if I didn't have my watch on at that time, he would immediately recognize, say, where's your watch? Don't you care what time it is? And throughout life, I've always appreciated watches, for their mechanical ability, their beauty, but mostly I call them timepiece because you're representing a piece of time. A piece of time that will never, ever, ever come back. And that's ultra important to me. Because when I look at my days, I look at my weeks and months, I say, where am I allocating that time? And is it being allocated appropriately? And have I always appropriately allocated my time? No. No, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But I try to keep that in mind. Okay, this time is not coming back. Should I be spending it doing said thing? So that's sort of where that comes from.
Gotcha. And I remember early on too, you had talked about showing up early, 10 to 15 minutes early is basically being on time, because you always need to prepare and things like that.
Right.
And there's this tiny story of Dennis and I going when we were going to meet you, I believe, for a Chamber of Commerce meeting one night. And we were like 5 minutes late, and we're just terrified of it. It was just one of those things where the pressure behind that, we've been late to so many meetings, it's crazy, but the one with you mattered so much because we knew time mattered to you and just the respect we had for you as an individual. But I remember the drive going there still. It's just like, oh my gosh, we're going to be late for Jason.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Oh, it cracks me up. So obviously, extremely varied past. Growing up, you've got all these different influences, you've got all these different moves, you've got an extremely structured environment, you've got a not so structured environment. You talked to us about graffiti, you talked to us about skateboarding, you talked to us about breakdancing, especially in your podcast with the one interview. Give me some idea of how being a part of what I would see as kind of countercultures has really influenced your life and gotten you to the point where you're at now. I'm just really curious to see how that kind of shaped the filter that you see the world and what that looks like to you moving forward.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a good question. Yeah, like I said, growing up, I was always drawn to counterculture just because I found life there. I found art. I found genuine personalities. I found sort of my center, because yeah, like I said, some of these countercultures, skateboard, punk rock, hardcore, straight edge, b-boying and hip hop, which is a very, very important part of my life, and all of these philosophies I still hold today, because there are things that taught me a multitude of lessons growing up. And the thing about some of these things that I grew up in is that they taught you whether you wanted to be taught or not. So it was, you could take your lessons, and sometimes those lessons were harsh. I've been beat up on multiple occasions in my youth. I've written in one thing, I said I've fought and won, and I've fought and lost. And the fights that I lost were my biggest lessons, because it teaches you a lot about yourself. It's sort of like that movie Fight Club. what do you know about yourself unless you've ever gotten into a fight? And in my youth, I had a lot of angst and I had a lot of anger because of, seeing my mom going through her alcoholism and being disconnected, which in certain occasions forced me to go out and figure out how to drum up money so I could feed my little sister. But I didn't really look at it as, well, I've got to do this to do that. I just thought, okay, well, we're hungry and there's not food in the house, and mom is sort of disconnected at this moment in time. And being sort of a street kid, I knew ratting was not a good thing, right? So I never wanted to tell anybody that my mom was an alcoholic. And so I never told my grandparents, so I thought, well, I'm going to hit the streets and do what I need to do. Well, I found really quickly that hubcaps, back in the 80s, was a flip business. And so sometimes when people say, where'd you get your start in entrepreneurship? Well, I hate to say it that way, but it was hubcaps. And but it was that strictly because it was fulfilling a need. I wasn't doing it to be, to be cool or anything like that. I thought hubcaps will bring me fast money. I didn't feel like I was hurting anybody, although I did. And anybody that's listening to this, if you are missing hubcaps from about 1986 to 1988, I sincerely apologize. And you know what? If you come to me, I will pay for your hubcaps. I promise you. There was a multitude of Mercedes-Benz hubcaps. I think there were some BMWs. I think there were some Chryslers. But anyway, I apologize, and I promise never ever to take that road again, no matter how wild or tough life gets. But that taught me a lot of lessons, because then what I did with that money is directly put it into string beans and SpaghettiOs. And at that time, it might have been SpaghettiOs and meatballs, because I ate meat when I was a little kid. I've been vegetarian now for 25 years. So now it would just be SpaghettiOs. But anyway, that's sort of where that came from.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I didn't realize we had that in common as well.
Were you still in hubcaps?
No, Oh, I wish I was that entrepreneurial. Yeah, I wish I was that entrepreneurial. No, was that necessity is the mother of all invention? That's what you had right there.
Yeah.
You had the invention of an entrepreneur out of necessity. And I think that whatever that path looks like, obviously there was a lot of benefit that came through your life because of it and because of what you did to get to that point. So, man, fascinating. We were first introduced to you, I believe, as the #1 most connected man in Salt Lake City. And I forget who said it, but there was actually quite a few people who have told us your name with that title.
Wow.
And it was really interesting to me. And in fact, you had told us a story early on of how you met people from different industries. And I believe it involved just basically going through the phone book and calling up people, seeing if they'd go to lunch. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that story and kind of some of the relationships that you developed there?
Yeah. Some of that also was sort of a product of my grandfather, Dean Hadfield. And at a young age, he told me, he said, it's important to build lifelong friendships. And he said, that was sort of a recurring mantra. And of course, growing up the way I did, that was sort of a given anyway. I thought, well, my friends, like when I say brother, like, you're my brother. Like, I literally look at you as my brother. So I don't just say brother or bro because of that sort of a slang. I literally look at that as humanity is my family. And whether I find my family in a pit of a hardcore show, or in an alleyway where b-boys are battling, or in a coffee shop, or in a boardroom, or whatever that looks like, it's my family. And so at a younger age, I thought, okay, well, what I need to do then is I need to pay all of my bills in person. So this is, late 90s, and well, mid to late 90s when you actually start, well, when I started collecting bills, got a cell phone bill, and my rent and insurance and all that. So I personally went in and made my payments every single month. Well, what that did is that it helped me create relationships that I still have today. My insurance agents, my mortgage brokers, my cell phone carrier, whatever that looked like, I was making payments, and everybody back then was saying, well, why don't you just do it in the mail? It makes better sense, and it saves time and everything. And I said, but I'm creating friendships. And throughout time, it got to a position where let's say my insurance agent would actually call me personally and say, hey Jason, I found a way to save you some money. Do you want to come in and talk a little bit? Well, it's because we created a friendship. And as opposed to just sort of like throwing the bill into the ether. And so then later on I figured, well, I want to make as many friends as possible because I want to help as many people as possible. Now, does it mean that I have the power to help everybody? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if I have something I can help someone with, I want to. But if I know someone that could help someone, then I can make that connection for them. And so there's been times where I've opened up phone books, and this is earlier on, of course, when phone books actually mattered. They used to be this thick, now they're like, I think that thick, maybe 1/4 of an inch, and every time I even get one delivered to my house, and I just think, are you guys still in business? But anyway, we'll probably talk on technological disruption sometime. But I'd get on LinkedIn and I'd say, you know what, I don't know someone in this particular industry. Or there's maybe a famous author that I want to get to know. Jerry Spence was one of them. Jerry Spence was an absolutely phenomenal trial lawyer and had written a handful of books, and I had a high level of admiration for him, so I started sending him letters, literally writing letters and sending them to him, and he was writing me back. And we actually had a very sort of high-level pen pal-ship going on, and he's at the time, and I'm not sure very much anymore, but he was one of the nation's most powerful trial attorneys. And so that's what I would do, and I would cold call people. And I would literally say, whether they were in New York, California, Montana, it didn't matter where they were. I would just say, hey, you know what, this is Jason Woodland in Salt Lake City. I don't know you, or I don't know someone in your industry, and I just want to make a friend. And for the most part, people were receptive. Some people definitely thought I was nuts, and I got hung up on probably 5 to 7% of the time, which was a lot lower than I was anticipating. But it led to creating cool relationships with people from SpaceX to Facebook. I mean, all kinds of just wild companies and industries, just simply because I said, I promise I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to make a friend. Because what grown man says, hey, do you want to be friends? I do. I do it all the time, and I love it. It freaks people out, but it's all good.
Man, that's fascinating. And you playing matchmaker to help people is really profound. I mean, obviously that's what you did for us with our Tea Partner, just connecting people like, hey, you have a need and you have a product, let's connect and go that way. And I think you do it really selflessly. I think the idea of helping people is kind of ingrained in your mantra and ingrained in you as an individual. And we talked about kind of the impact you want to have on this world. I believe you had said that you want to help 1 million people, and that's kind of the goal of the number that's set to it now. So I really appreciate the idea of the more people you know, the more you can help, the more you can connect and actually go that direction.
Right.
Something else that's really profound to me too is knowing that you are focused on time, that you're very efficient, that you look at time as this very valuable asset, yet you are willing to spend it in the endeavor of building relationships. That is something, at least for the most part, of course there's always external circumstances and things like that, but it seems like it's something you're always willing to put forward. I just know with some of the chamber meetings that we've been at with you, some of the different events and things like that, you're always willing to stay later to talk to people. You're always willing to continue to cultivate that relationship, even if it means sacrificing a little bit of sleep, even if it means sacrificing some of your own personal time. So it's always stood out to me that you're willing to sacrifice that time for someone else. It seems like you're very willing to sacrifice on the individual level if you believe you can help someone or move in that direction. I just think that's an amazing trait and something that we've really picked up on watching you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I honestly love the relationship building. One thing I wanted to touch on just briefly was, you had talked, and I believe this goes back a little bit to your mother and some of the issues that she had with alcohol, but you've mentioned a few times that you abstain from drugs, alcohol, gambling, things like that you had mentioned.
I only gamble when I eat out.
Only gamble when I eat out, yeah, I can understand. The Yelp gamble, just trying to find 4 stars or better. But yeah, tell us a little bit about why that is, what the mindset is behind that. I think it's powerful, and I think people would appreciate hearing it too.
Sure. Let me make sure I am also clear that my mom was, in my worldview, the best mother that could have ever existed. She was absolutely amazing. You know, when she was not drinking, she was right on top of it in terms of like homework. She was a math whiz. She understood algebra on a level that was honestly mind-blowing to me. She was also bilingual. She spoke English and Spanish for the most part. I'm talking brilliant, and in terms of artistic, she was magnificent as well. Great singer. She ended up doing voiceover work later on. So I want to make sure I give like a huge plug to my mom. She was also the one that really ingrained an extremely high level of confidence in me, which I'm extremely and eternally grateful for. And yes, my mom did pass away January 1st, 1998, and that's why I sort of speak somewhat in a past tense, although I never mean to, because I believe that her spirit is sort of an ever long push forward. But growing up in that type of environment, I personally chose to abstain from going down that road. I don't judge anybody that goes down that road. I know it's a rough path. I don't know it personally partaking, but watching what my family had gone through as a young person and what had ultimately taken her away from us is definitely a phenomenally powerful driver for me personally. The other thing is, there was someone in one of my old neighborhoods. He had a mother who was a heroin user. This is when I'm a very young person at this time, and we were spending some time hanging out. Well, in a nutshell, without getting too overly emotional about it, we watched her overdose, and she died in front of us. And as a young person, that's very formative, and that told me at a phenomenally young age, this is not a path that you're going to take ever, period. And unfortunately, have known a handful of people that have died from heroin overdoses and a multitude of everything else, just because being very, very blessed and lucky, and I say that knowing a lot of absolutely amazing and wonderful people, you also increase your odds of knowing more people that have died for some reason or another. So yes, losing my mother was my worst nightmare come true. So anyway, that is the driving catalyst that has pushed me to abstain from drinking or smoking or doing drugs. There was even a period of time in my young days that I wouldn't even watch TV at all, because I figured that was its own drug. I wouldn't take any over-the-counter medicine or headache medicine or anything along those lines. Even still to today, I'm very careful with how much TV I watch. I'm careful with if I take a headache medicine. I'm just careful along those lines. Not that I think it's going to flip me out or do anything crazy, but that TV thing then goes back into the time. So I say, okay, well, I like watching TV here and there, so I want to put that out. But a lot of people think that I'm like totally anti-TV. I'm only somewhat anti-TV. I do like watching The Prophet. I like watching Shark Tank. And as far as movies go, I'm all about business or mafia. And so it sort of trips out my wife, Kate, because she's like, that's all you like is just business or mafia. I'm like, yeah, pretty much. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's amazing. I imagine that means you're not one of the individuals that waits till a season comes out on Netflix and then just binge watches the whole season.
No, but actually there are two shows that I do appreciate. Ballers on HBO and Silicon Valley. Oh, I think those two are magnificent. Silicon Valley, the writers there are great. So.
Man, yeah, I need to check out Silicon Valley. Dennis actually talked about it and said it was a fantastic show. So. Man, Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That means a lot. I just heard you talk about it so many times before to actually know that and to see the impact of what it had on you at such a young age. I think obviously there's a lot of power that comes from the first impacts that we have in this world, the different things that we see and stuff like that, and so completely and totally understand it. And just to clarify too on my side, Jason has always been unbelievably respectful. You've just been so respectful to say, you know what, live your life how you want to live it. This is just how I live mine. I respect you for living the life that you choose. I'm not going to look down on you. I'm not going to not have a relationship with you because of it.
Right.
I'm simply going to say this is why I'm living the way that I live. And that's why I really respect your opinion on a lot of these things too, because it's never given with this idea of I'm right, you're wrong. It's always given with this idea of this is what I've learned in my life and this is what I believe. You can believe whatever you want. I'm just telling you how I see it. And I really respect that. I think that's a great way to look at it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely important to me is your own personal freedom to do whatever you decide you want to do. So yeah.
Yeah, totally see that. And you know, with all the relationships that you've built, obviously you have a lot to pull from for this podcast. You have a lot of people that you've been able to talk to. And just to get out there, I absolutely love your podcast. I finally went through, I listened to all the episodes. I thought it was phenomenal. It was great to hear the little snippets about your life, which I'll admit, I was kind of thinking, oh, I should do some research for this and see his background and stuff like that. And then I just started getting into these individual stories of each person that you were interviewing. And there were some phenomenal people there, people that are on the cutting edge of different technologies, of cryptocurrency, of predictive AI. Even hearing your dad talk about some of his experiences were fantastic. Also have an actor, there was an individual there, I believe Nick was his name, that was talking about being diagnosed with MS and just
actually MD, muscular dystrophy.
MD, excuse me, thank you so much. Yeah, it was phenomenal to be able to see these unique stories, not just for the relationships that you've cultivated, but also to get the perspectives of these people that have lived these wonderful lives and are still living these wonderful lives, are still pushing forward in the different aspects or fields or relationships that they're part of. So moving that direction, I'm really curious about your take about the future. I would consider you a futurist. Like I said, I believe you're eternally optimistic, and we've talked a lot about cryptocurrency and some other technologies and things like that. You know, the way that I was going to look at this was to basically say, you had mentioned once, what matters is what happens after what comes next.
Yeah.
Why is that the case? Why do you feel so strongly about that?
So at a young age, I read the book, The Art of War. And that spoke to me on a level that I still can't really explain. I actually don't look at that book as you sit down and read it. It's more of a study. But what Sun Tzu, I mean, it's extremely deep. But you know, he talks a lot about winning a war before the war starts. And that concept was totally mind-blowing to me at a young age, and it still is. And so what that tells me is that it's about looking 5 to 10 steps ahead. So I read that at a young age, read it now 5 times in its entirety, and I still use it as a resource guide, as well as a lot of other ancient Far East war strategists, Miyamoto Musashi, Yagi Minonori, a lot of these people I study in depth. Miyamoto Musashi was an ancient swordsman, and the amount of lessons that I took out of him also were about looking living in the now. Yes, that's absolutely important, but also taking a look at what does that next step look like. So then later on, when I was living in Hong Kong, I lived for one of the months I was out there. I was living with a doctor, and he was a voracious reader. He read literally. He was probably reading a book a week. And he would just set down the book and say, Jason, you need to read this book. You need to read this book. And it was just book after book. And I thought, wow, I can't keep up with this guy. But that's also what also taught me to read between 50 and 100 books every single year. So anyway, one of the books he sat down was a book called 500-Year Delta. And that subtitled, What Happens After What Comes Next? That also immediately spoke to my soul without even reading the rest of the book, although of course I've read that book a few times. And what that says to me is, if you're trying to look at what happens next week or next month or even next year, you've already lost. And what I mean by already lost is in the world of economics, in the world of business, in the world of technology and technological change. If you're just looking at what's going on right now, there's framework that's being built and has been built already that's going to disrupt everything as you know it right now. So unless you're taking a look at what's happening to the best of your ability in the future, you're already left behind. And so I've said on a multitude of occasions, and I'm sure other people have said it, train yourself now for the business or job that does not exist yet. And of course, the immediate follow-up question to that is, well, how do I do that? And they said, well, how you do that is to start reading the future. Now, I'm not saying be clairvoyant, because that's cool if people can do that. That's a whole different thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about looking at what trends are taking place as we speak, but taking a quick snapshot look of 5 to 10 years ago and see what people were talking about, but then immediately start shooting out in the future and saying, okay, well, if this is happening now, what does the future of jobs look like? What does the future of technology look like? And no matter how wild and crazy that rabbit hole gets, I'll take it. I'll take that rabbit hole and I will drive down that rabbit hole at 1,000 miles per hour so I can learn every single thing I can possibly learn before it happens, because I don't ever want to be blindsided. And one of the lessons I learned in a public relations management class I took, the instructor was I think he was the president or something of their HR department. And he told me, of Northrop Grumman. So he worked for a defense contractor. And he said, if anybody is in the C-suite, and meaning that CEO, COO, CTO, whatever that that outline, if anybody is blindsided as someone in the C-suite, they're in the wrong position. And I thought, wow. I said, and so of course I asked further, well, what do you mean by that? He said they should already know everything that's about to come down the pipe. They should know what technology could put them out of business. They should know what competition could put them out of business. They should already have at least some kind of a grasp on all of those items. And if something happens in their business that breaks or causes a problem and they didn't know, they were just simply the wrong person, or they were in on it, so to speak. So anyway, that's sort of where some of those concepts come from.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I love that idea of the C-suite being blindsided, because I believe, talked about the idea of you're kind of the CEO of your own life. And
yes.
So the fact is, you are in the C-suite of your own organization.
Yes.
So if you're blindsided by things in your own life, there should be preparation. You should be, as you said earlier, picking up those keys and trying to prepare yourself for what's coming, and trying to at least be aware of the world that you're in and all the different things there. A big part of a lot of our conversations, at least recently, as I've jumped a little bit more into it, has been cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency seems to be what happens next with currency. Obviously, you have a ton of knowledge behind that, and as opposed to going into the intricate details of what cryptocurrency is and blockchain technology, I'd like to more talk about the implications that the technology has as a whole on the world and kind of where you see that going. Obviously, you see an extremely powerful force. I'd just like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so in essence, there are a handful of, so to speak, powerful forces that are at work as we speak in terms of technology. So there's a handful of technologies that have actually been around for quite some time, but didn't have a handful of things. Infrastructure, they didn't have money behind it, they didn't have data behind it. So to speak to the concept of big data and artificial intelligence, I would say, if I had to name 3 technologies that are going to shake the world within the next, I'd say 5 to 10 years, it will be artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, and the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things, for those who are maybe not as familiar, is literally connecting everything to the Internet. So you've got smart refrigerators, you've got smart cars. Obviously, we've been in smartphones for quite some time. So we will continue connecting things to the Internet. Artificial intelligence, now connected with extreme large-scale big data collection with the Internet. That's going to move forward as an extreme force in the world. And it will change business as we know it on a pretty large scale. A lot of times, and I've talked to people that are pretty deep into the artificial intelligence sphere, And we've had that conversation in terms of, does this take away jobs? And yes, it's going to take away jobs. There's no way around that. But what I look at it as is that it may take away, I don't want to say menial jobs, because every job on some level and to some person is important. I never like to downplay what anybody does, because what we all do in our daily lives is important to us, otherwise we wouldn't do it. And it's also important to other people that are able to benefit from those types of jobs. But jobs will change. And some jobs will disappear. But in place of that, new jobs will appear. That's where I'm saying start training for the business or job that doesn't exist yet. Because think about the concept of a social media marketing manager or a social media person. 10 years ago, pretty much not, right? 15 years ago, that didn't even exist whatsoever. But now it's not only a job and a business, but it's an extremely important job and a business that helps a lot of other businesses market and get their word out. So the next thing is going to be blockchain technology. And these are in no specific order. These are actually all technologies and concepts that are currently being worked on, and there's an astronomical amount of power and money that are pushing these into the future. So whether you're taking it serious or not, or afraid of it, that's the thing that's important in my worldview is to, well, it's coming regardless, whether you want it to come or not, so you might as well learn as much as you can about it. And so when I started hearing the concept of blockchain, for instance, I started reading a little bit about that back in 2011, because first of all, I just thought it was a cool name. Honestly, that's, I just thought it was a cool name. And at that point in time, I was in the business finance arena, helping small businesses raise capital. And I thought, well, it looks like there's some new sort of goofy internet money. Let's learn a little bit about it. I also didn't take it very serious at that point in time. And although I took the concept of the blockchain digital ledger extremely serious, I didn't know what the concept of digital currency was going to end up turning out to be like. Studied economics from a very young age just because the world of finance I love learning everything to do with finance and economics and what money does and how money works and how to make money work appropriately. And so learning a little bit about that, I thought, wow, this could be something big in the future. And then of course throughout the years, and then meeting my friend Will Bound, who is an original cyberpunk and is brilliant with coding and blockchain and artificial intelligence technology. We met actually at my tea shop when I had it, and we just started going. I started going further down that rabbit hole, and now I always study every single day. I dedicate a minimum of 1 hour every day to study, whether it be reading books, listening to a podcast, researching technology, doing these types of things so I can be on that cutting edge as possible. So I can look at artificial intelligence and Internet of Things and big data and blockchain and what the world of cryptocurrency looks like now, where it came from and where it's going to go, and embrace all of that as much as I can and learn about it so I don't then become blindsided, so to speak. Yeah.
No, that's fascinating. And for everyone listening on the Clever Bean side, the Will Bound podcast episode, it's episode number 2, absolutely phenomenal. Talks about a sandwich that was purchased, I believe, for 1.7 Bitcoin, and the episode was done at a time when Bitcoin was at $10,000. So it was a $17,000 sandwich if applied there. I just thought there were so many fascinating stories about it, and it was excellent to listen to that. There's so much disruption in the market. It seems as though a lot of it, and we talked about this before, is coming from the decentralization of currency and different markets and things like that. A lot of change is happening as the future comes forward. One of the largest sections that's being changed is retail, and we've talked a couple of times about what you see as the future of retail, especially bringing in the idea of humans still being this hunter-gatherer species, and so the shopping aspect isn't going away. Give me just a little bit into that picture of what you believe the future of retail looks like and kind of how the shopping experience comes. I think it ties into really what we're kind of seeing as a future society and as all this technology moves forward.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. That also makes me want to definitely add in terms of large-scale disruptive technologies that will continue coming down the pipe are VR and AR. So virtual reality, augmented reality. Those are very important technologies that will continue to take shape. There's an astronomical amount of framework and infrastructure that's being currently built as we speak behind all of these technologies. And that's, yeah, this is the rabbit hole. This is taking yourself out of the matrix and sort of taking whatever color pill that was, where you said, you know, you can either continue living in this normal world, which, don't get me wrong, I love the normal world. Like, it's for the most part comfortable. Yes, we've got our dramas and ups and downs and so forth, but taking that other pill takes you into a whole different realm and lets you understand that things are currently changing, and they will continue to change, but they will continue to change at an ever rapid rate. And so the world of retail, I look at the concept of both economic and technological disruption, honestly, with extreme optimism. And the reason why I look at technology or technological disruption with optimism is because virtually there's a lot of jobs out there that will be lost. Like I said, they will be replaced and things will look different. But in my worldview, what that does, because in my heart, humans have got a lot of heart, and there's a lot of wonderful thoughts and dreams that humans have that usually don't come to fruition. And they don't come to fruition usually because of fear. Technological disruption virtually forces the hand of certain people to figure out a different job or maybe a business. Think about all the people that said, yeah, I lost my job in 2008 and I had to figure something out. My back was against the wall, so I started said business. Think about all the magnificent companies that came out of the Great Depression. Same thing with 2008 meltdown. Well, those were, in essence, forced disruptions that then virtually pulled the card of everyone. And then it made you re-examine, oh, I need to figure things out. So my optimism with disruption comes from the fact that it may force someone's hand out of maybe a job that they were too comfortable in for the last 20 years or 15 years or 30 years, whatever that looks like, and now they're forced to follow their dreams. And that might sound a little harsh. It sort of reminds me of that part in Fight Club, which I don't, it's sort of a crazy part where he's got that gun to that guy's head, and he said, I've got your address, I've got your ID, and if you're not on your way to becoming, I think it was a veterinarian tomorrow morning, like, I'm coming to your house. And although that was definitely dark and sort of a rough ride, just like Tyler Durden said in the movie, tomorrow morning his breakfast will taste better than it ever has had before, because now he's forced to follow his dream. So now the world of retail, it's being currently disrupted. It will continue to be disrupted. Last year we saw Toys R Us file bankruptcy. You know, and then there's some people that are saying, oh, well, the hedge funds should have stepped in and given them money to help them continue. Well, the catch is we hold on a lot to the nostalgia of yesterday and what we liked when we were growing up and so forth. The catch is some of these businesses are still working on a 20-year ago framework, or 30 years ago, or 50 years ago, or whatever that framework of yesterday looks like. So we're honestly just starting to see the tip of disruption in terms of retail. I think we will continue down the path of seeing businesses go away, but replaced with new concepts. One of those concepts, in my view, and I think it would be really cool to see, because like you just mentioned, humans are a hunter-gathering species, so I don't see the world of retail is going away. because we still like to go out in the world and find that trinket, find that new shirt, find the whatever it is we're looking for, and bring it home. So, but it's going to change, because the idea of housing a huge amount of inventory in a retail location is becoming less feasible, because now you're having to sit on an astronomical amount of inventory, and if it doesn't sell, then you're blowing it out at 50% off in the fall, and whatever that element looks like. I look at virtual reality taking a large position in the retail space. So I won't name any particular names, but imagine one of your favorite big box, not necessarily like for grocery shopping per se, but let's say a high-end clothing store, where they may have housed a 60,000 square foot building. I see sometime in the future where that same company still exists, but now they've got a facility that's 2,000 square feet, and they hold zero inventory. But when you walk in, you're still greeted with someone maybe in a suit or a dress. They give you a cup of tea. You know, there's fresh flowers sitting there. But instead of you walking around and looking at inventory, you walk into a room that is retrofitted for virtual reality. So you walk into a room, you put on the goggles, and there's measuring mechanisms that will automatically take your weight, your height, your belt size, your shoes. I mean, literally, it'll size you up 100%. But then, in the VR world, you will only see clothing that will fit you exactly to your measurement. So in front of you, you're literally swiping by. So it's sort of like the Tinder for clothing, right? You don't like this, swipe left, you like this. I actually don't know how it works. Is swipe left for good or bad? I don't know how that works. But anyway, you'll swipe for something that you like, but you automatically know. You click once with your finger, and it'll show up on your avatar. You'll look to your left, and there's a mirror in your VR world, and you'll see exactly what it looks like. If you like it, you'll tap again, and then it'll open up your ability to pay. So whether it be an American Express, Visa, MasterCard, your Bitcoin wallet, whatever way you want to pay, you just click it, and then within 24 to 48 hours, it's on your doorstep. The benefit, obviously, of that is that you can shop. You can go out and about, you can have dinner, you're with your family, you're with your friends, but you carry nothing with you. So now you don't have to walk around with a bunch of bags. You don't have to worry about putting it in your car and having your car get broken into and all of your stuff stolen. Yeah, not that statistically that's extremely high, I guess, depending on where you're at, but you don't need to worry about it either way. It just shows up at your house. And then while you're in your VR world, you're looking to your right and you're being advertised to by companies that are also, they know your style. So now maybe you look over to your right and there's a Nike ad. And you're like, oh, I like those Nikes. You just click once, it shows up on your avatar, you check them out in the mirror, cool or not, you click them again, it takes off. That's where the world of at least clothing retail, there's always going to be places with inventory. I'm not saying that that's going away, because we also like to go out. I'm the kind of person that does not take things back. I like to go and, at best, I'll try it on at the store. If I even try it on, I usually just look at the tag and I'm like, okay, cool, let's rock. Or if I put it on, like, I'm not going back to the store to take it back. That's just my style. But anyway, that's sort of my world view of retail.
Man, I really like that for a couple of reasons. First off, I love the fact of how developed your idea of what's happening in the future is, and I think that comes from being so focused on proactively thinking about what comes next. And I think having that visual representation of what it is allows you to approach the world with a very open mind, but also a very focused mind of saying, you know what, I believe this can still exist. There's been so many people that have talked about how retail is just going away, how the convenience of the internet is causing it not to be a part. And I think the hunter-gatherer side of things is so important. I think people enjoy the experience. I also feel, and you mentioned it there with the Nike ads, the advertising is going to happen differently in a retail setting, because advertising being such a revenue generator for online sales, and then obviously Google and Facebook making so much money off of ads, I think that's going to be incorporated more into a day-to-day atmosphere. But one of the things I wanted to touch on too was what you had first mentioned about humans being so adaptive. I just feel as though humanity itself is very adaptive to all these different roles that may be coming in the future, and that's why trying to prepare yourself for the future is so important. But it's also a beautiful thing that when we're forced to change, we change, and we change for the better. We try and make it better, and I think again that goes back to your optimism and really shows kind of the faith that you have in humanity. But I love that idea. We talk a lot about purpose here and the different events that we do, like the Junto and stuff like that. And purpose is a really big player for both Dennis and I. And I heard it once where it's like, you know what? Purpose isn't created by a job. No one is born just ready to be a graphic designer. You may be born artistic, and then that realization turns into graphic design, and then that's the slot in society that you help fill and push forward. Because just like you said, everyone is important as part of this framework of society moving forward. But it's not like you were just born to be a graphic artist. There's a lot of interpretation, a lot of creating that goes into that. So it makes me believe that humans are just the ultimate adaptation machine. And I think that you really see that in the future, and as things change, you see the beauty of that adaptation and how it's happening. One of the things that we talked about, just to give a brief insight onto some of the operations we have here, is that if we could have robots behind the bar, we would do it in a heartbeat. If we could press a button and make whatever drink you wanted come out, we'd do it in a heartbeat. Because the fact is that it's not necessarily the artistic style of drinks that is the most important aspect that we're serving here. It's the human connection and the community that comes along with it. So if you can have robots take care of whatever in the background, if you can have AI take care of whatever in the background, it allows for humanity to resume being humans again. It allows for you to build relationships, to focus on those things that you're already willing to spend time on, that you already see the value in. It allows people to spend time with each other, to build community, to support each other, and I just see that being so important in today's day and age, where it feels like we're more connected than ever before, and yet more disconnected than ever before as well. So really appreciate the ideas that you have of things that are coming from the future. And one of the things, because you've thought so much about the different ways the future looks like, that I've always wanted to know is how, when you see so many changes coming down the pipeline, when you see so many issues brought up by technology and a changing world and everything that goes along, how do you filter through what's important and what's not important? Because the fact is we deal with a lot of fads today. And I think you have a really good focus on things that are really going to matter in the future. What is it that gives you that focus?
Let's see. What is it that gives me that focus? Definitely passion of learning is the biggest driver behind that. And then also a necessity, because there's honestly, well, as we all know, there's a lot of technologies that have come and gone that are just sort of like they were supposed to be the thing and then they weren't the thing. But looking at derivatives of technologies that are currently working extremely well. That's one of the big things that I take a look at is, okay, what derives from Facebook? What derives from Instagram? What derives from credit scoring? What do these things look like? And because social media is not going away. And I honestly would say that Facebook, well, at least isn't going away anytime soon. And there's going to be different ways in different social media platforms. Twitter at one point was phenomenally important, and then it sort of waned. But then in the tech and cryptocurrency world, it is wildly important. It's one of the biggest platforms that people in that community speak. Obviously, you've got Instagram, which is an extremely important platform. But then you're also taking a look at the focus of, well, okay, there's new technology. Can this be adopted? Like, in the beginning, obviously most technologies aren't. They sort of go through that, the adoption curve. So you've got the adoption curve. You've got the innovator. That's usually like the person that is, well, they were mining Bitcoin in 2009. Or standing in line for the brand new smartphone, and they're there for 24 hours. That's the innovator. Then you've got I think it's the early majority. Can't remember, I've been in class for a while, but anyway, you've got the adoption curve, and looking at what kind of technology could actually be absorbed into society, but then also looking at the derivatives. So looking at blockchain, obviously the most important cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, hands down the most important cryptocurrency, and will continue being the most important in my worldview, going forward, no matter how many other cryptocurrencies there are. But what does that look like? Because obviously you've got people saying, well, it's slow and it's old technology and et cetera, et cetera. But the derivatives of such are what could be built on top of that blockchain, Lightning Network, those types of technologies. What does the future of, let's say, credit scoring look like? I've actually said on a multitude of occasions, even though there's laws that protect what can and cannot be in a credit score, sooner, I think, rather than later, whether that's part of the legal framework or not, social media will play a part in your overall social score. So I actually see sometime in the future that you're not only going to have a FICO score that rates you on your creditworthiness, but also what is your social worthiness. And you know, so there's going to be algorithms that are going to be reading your Facebook feed, your Twitter feed, your Instagram. It's going to read all of that stuff, and someone is going to judge you by it, whether you like it or not. I actually think it's already in the framework. And yeah, is it, or it could potentially be an invasion of privacy? Yeah, I think the privacy thing that's a whole different conversation, so we've sort of blown past that quite a long time ago. But anyway, that's really it. The focus of derivatives that can come out of certain technologies, and what do I believe could be the potential for it to be absorbed into an economic sense.
Totally understand that. And I believe the same thing on privacy. Is the fact is, it seems like we've gone so far past that because there's so little privacy today, it feels as though there's more power behind being a genuine individual than there ever has been before. I'm hoping that's what was created as a result from all of this, is that you're dealing with people that are more genuine on a day-to-day basis, not only because it's helpful for society as a whole, but also because if everyone's transparent, I also believe it gives a lot more confidence for people to try new things, for failure to be seen as a lesson as opposed to a negative. And there's so many positives that come out of that, but really interesting to see how the world's going to keep going on that side.
Yeah.
One of the large technologies that's kind of on the tip of the brain, on the edge of the tongue, it seems as though eventually there may be the potential, and you had touched on this briefly with your interview with Bill, talking about being able to extend the individual's life past a normal human lifespan to the point of transferring consciousness to a machine or to a computer program. And the one question that I have, just because I'm very curious to get your outset on this, is if you had that opportunity, if you had the opportunity to continue living for an extended, even very extended amount of time, would you choose to take that?
As in turning myself into an artificial intelligence robot? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's something that like we talked about in episode number 2 with my dear friend Will Bound. That's what he's currently working on, is to literally merge himself into a machine. Not necessarily cyborg style, like Terminator, where you're half robot, half human, but literally turning his entire consciousness into an AI robot. Because AI it's freaky. You know, I'll be the first to say that. I definitely embrace it. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. I think it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of magnificent positives that come out of it. But there's definitely going to be a handful of negatives. There's going to be things that we don't understand. Obviously, there's a lot that we don't understand right now by a bit. And there's going to be some changes that will take place. But it will be able to really get a good understanding of who you are mentally, and emotionally. It's sort of like that movie Her. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I didn't, unfortunately, but I heard great things.
Joaquin Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, he starts a relationship with it's a virtual relationship with an artificial intelligence. And it's a very intimate relationship. And when he realizes that she is also having relationships simultaneously with like thousands of other people at the exact same time, that's a trip. I mean, that blew my mind, and it was just a movie. So those are possibilities. Yeah, they're in the movies right now, but the movies sometimes have a possibility of being able to show what the future could look like. too bad we can't sort of walk into a transporter and I can go to Italy tonight and have a spaghetti dinner and come back. But who knows? Maybe the future holds that as well. But anyway, yeah, I think the possibility of being able to turn ourselves into virtually a machine will at some point in time be possible. And who knows? Maybe 5 years after one of us passes away, I'll be able to send you 25 satoshis, which is the broken down aspect of Bitcoin. I'll send that to you for your birthday, but I will have already been gone for 2 years.
It's crazy.
It is ultra crazy, and who knows? It may go that way, it may not, we don't know. We'll see.
No, and I think that's fascinating, and I think it just comes back to the idea of the longer that you're around, the more people you can help, the more things you can do, and also coming back to just being a beneficial part of society for as long as possible. And I completely respect that. I think that where AI goes will be more and more confusing as we see the future. And confusion causes fear in some sense, but I also love the idea of being optimistic, of feeling as though there's a lot of positives that can come from this, that it can really help humanity reach that next level of kind of moving forward and being able to create this relationship with technology that benefits basically all of mankind. So I'm really excited to see where the future takes us and what we've got. To tell you the honest truth, that's basically all I had. I wanted to do one quick shout out talking about Always the Journey. We had touched on it briefly. Just for anyone on the Clever Bean side who hasn't had a chance to check it out, Jason's podcast and his blog is at www.alwaysthejourney.com. Always the Journey, just because it's always about the journey. It's always about moving forward, and I really appreciate that name and what you've done with it. He's got phenomenal episodes on his podcast. He also has some phenomenal blog posts. Had mentioned earlier about reading 50 books this year. I saw that one of the books that you have already read was The Thank You Economy by Gary Vee. So love that book, thought it was one of his most powerful ones. Really love the idea of giving value so much, and I really think it's the idea that you embody, is that if you can give more value to a relationship than you take from it, you feel as though that relationship is successful, and we've definitely seen that in the way that you cultivated the relationship with Dennis and I, the way that you helped us out with the shop. And the fact is, this shop would not be what it is today if it wasn't for your influence. So,
well, that's thank you for saying that. I definitely don't know if I deserve that much credit.
I 100%
you guys are awesome.
know you do. 100% know you do. And no, it was such a pleasure here tonight. Thank you so much for having the opportunity for me to see all of your fancy equipment and to be on the podcast and to do all of this. I know Dennis and I really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun with this. I was really excited last night. It was hard for me to sleep, not just because I drink coffee all day, but also because I was so excited for this. So just 100% want to say thank you for having this conversation with me, for allowing me to be part of your podcast, and for being part of the Clever Bean as it is. So
cool.
Thank you very much. So.
Hey, you're welcome, man. I sincerely appreciate it, and it's been a lot of fun doing this, in live and knowing that we're not doing any post-production, so
Live's done now.
Huh?
Live's done now, but it is on YouTube.
Oh, well, no, we're still live. You know what I'm saying? But obviously not live to a bunch of people, but live in terms of not doing any post-production or chopping it up, and I like that. I think that's it shows that authenticness of the people. Authenticness, if that's does that work? Is it
rawness? Something I don't know.
Whatever.
It sounds
you all get it. Anyway, it's been a ton of fun. This is episode number 9 for Always the Journey. The reason why we say always the journey is because yes, you've got to make sure you've got a focus on your journey. It's the ups and the downs and the roller coaster of life. Obviously, you've got to have a destination, otherwise you're throwing blindly darts into the ether, and you need to make sure you've got a destination. But if you're not paying attention to your journey and learning the lessons, the harsh lessons, the positive lessons each and every day, you're honestly not going to know exactly how you got to your destination, and you won't be able to replicate without paying attention to your journey. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a wrap. We're down here at the Clever Bean. Creighton as my interviewer and Dennis as the proprietor with Creighton down here. I love this place. I love these guys. You definitely need to come down here and check it out. Located in Draper. Creighton, throw out the address one more time.
Yeah, 656 East 114th South, Suite J in Draper.
And it is sweet. And they chose J for Jason. And when he says Sweet J, it means Sweet Jason. So yeah, let's rock and roll.
That should be the name of this podcast episode, Sweet Jason.
Sweet Jason. We'll say Sweet J for short. Perfect. Anyway, this is a wrap. Please take care of yourselves. And watch out for any future episodes. Thank you very much. Peace out.
Can we get
That is a wrap.
handshake? Looking at
handshake?
each other, handshake. I'll
Do you still
take a
want
photo.
to shake my hand after all that? Are you cool?
Without a doubt. Let me make sure I
Thanks
get
for the
this.
clap. Thanks for the single clap. It means a lot.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks. Did you guys have fun?
Yeah.
Was it interesting at least?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
The
Awesome.
bits and pieces we heard between studying, yeah.
Oh no, that's fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks.
That's awesome. Here, let's do one of these. One of
Handshake,
these,
what do
one
we
of
have
these
to?
kinds.
Wait, is this a arm wrestle? Am I winning or losing right now?
You're winning.
You're losing.
I have to think of the dumb joke now.
Alright, I got photos. Cool.
Oh man. So how do you feel?
Great.
Yeah, think it went well?
I think it
That's
went
okay?
extremely well.
Gonna
Yeah.
cut the whole thing, not use it. New episode 9. Don't even.
And dude, this thing is going to be blasting out like Saturday.
Oh man.
Just because I might be a little bit too booked tomorrow to throw it up. But yeah, there's no post-production, so it's going on just
Dude,
like it is.
as long as you feel like everything was, I know I had a great time with it. I wanted to try and create something that you felt was quality enough to go with the rest of the episodes of your podcast because I do feel that they are so powerful. So hopefully it's something that goes along at least somewhat of the same lines with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for letting us do this.
It's a pleasure.
Fantastic. Dennis, thank you for taking care of all of
For
the
sure.
rush that came through.
When it got down to like at the end of like the line of dreams,
Yeah.
there's a flight.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Dude, I just like as Jason's
I
talking.
just apologized a lot.
No.
I just apologized a lot, and then it worked out.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you for taking care of everything. All I hear when that entire start, after you took all the orders and you took that, I just hear the decaf grinder. And the decaf's always miserable to try and work with. It just takes like 2 to 3
it's all
times the
good.
amount of time. So all I hear is the decaf grinder. I'm like, it'll start with decaf.
You know, it's funny because when I first started this, I was like hypersensitive to if there was any background noise.
Yeah.
You know, if the dog was barking, because my first one was done at my house with my dad. I'm like, oh, make sure the dogs aren't barking.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, you know, now episode 9 in, like you just sort of flow and just let it.
It's part of life.
Yeah. So the last one I also didn't do any post production on.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I listened. I re-listened to about 60% of it, and then I just threw it up.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, because sometimes I say a bit, and so sometimes I click out my ums, and I just got to that point where I'm like, yeah, screw it. I can
It's like
actually
no
tell you
perfectionist, just-
what is an what is a I can tell you like what it looks like in the sound.
Oh crazy. That's awesome.
Like that's an right there. Right there.
Oh man, that is awesome.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Man.
Well, you guys close sometime soon, right?
Nah, 24/7, 365.
That's right, dude.
Always the journey, man. It's always on.
It is.
Oh man.
So how do you feel it went from video